Another Wednesday and another story. Welcome back to Pink Slip Pavilion. If you're new here, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so you never miss a Pink Slip to Power Move story. And if you missed last week's episode, you may want to go back because this is part two of my story and the founding story of Pink Slip Pavilion, from laid off to founder.
This pink slip's the start, not the end.
Okay, so continuing on in my story, and for those of you who are just now joining, I have been laid off twice in my career. So yes, I've gotten a pink slip. I've gotten it twice in my career, two very different experiences and seasons of life, which is why my story is broken into two episodes. So if you haven't heard the first part, I highly encourage that. This is the second part. This is 32 years old. This is 5 years with the company, established in my career, making good money, in many people's eyes, successful in corporate America, right? And I felt insecure in my position in the sense that the company was going through a lot of changes. The economy had taken some hits. The company was going through multiple rounds of layoffs. So if you didn't have fear that you might get laid off, then you probably weren't really paying attention. But at the same time, you always assume if you're producing and you're showing up and you're putting in the effort that it won't be your number. And so if you've ever been the person who's like, I'm producing, I'm showing up, like, I don't understand why I got laid off, happens all the time. And there's a lot of different factors that go into these decisions within a company behind closed doors. So just keep that in mind. It has nothing to do with your worth. But that's where I was in my career. And I was on my, I don't even know how many leaders I had had in that 5 year span. Originally, I took the job because the leader at the time really motivated me and inspired me. I had interviewed to be a recruiter, and she ended up hiring someone else and said, I want you to be on my sales team. And I said, I don't do sales. And she's like, I bet you can. And that's how the journey began for me there. I learned a ton from her. I'm still inspired by who she is and what she does. And after that, her predecessor was trained by her. And so, very similar experience. And then once that person left, the leadership got rough, if I'm honest. And so there was a constant revolving door of leadership. There was a lot of challenges. There was a lot of changes with the team. And the core of it all really was my coworkers and my clients. They were my stability in that corporation and in that position and in that season of life. We went through COVID together. We came out of COVID together. And I didn't see my layoff coming until actually 2 days before I left for vacation. So I was about to leave for my first ever 2 week vacation. I was turning 32 and had booked a trip to Italy. It was my Eat, Pray, Love season. And I had never taken 2 weeks off in corporate America. And if I had taken a week off, I had never turned my phone or my computer off. And so this was the first time I was ever going to fully unplug. And I had booked the trip months in advance, of course. And so 2 days before I left, my leadership team in my one-on-one, where I would normally say, okay, here's the business in my pipeline, here's how it's going to work while I'm gone, here's everything you need to know to make sure that business doesn't stop because I'm not here. That was the meeting that I had joined, I thought, and it ended up being 30 minutes of my leadership team telling me how much they didn't want me to be there anymore, and they didn't feel like I was valuable to the team, called me a cancer to the team, told me my colleagues didn't like working with me. Keep in mind, I'm friends with my colleagues, so that felt like somebody's lying. Who is it? And it hurt. It hurt a lot. I had come prepared to the meeting with everything the business needed to keep running with or without me. And I found out in that meeting that the business wanted to just exist without me. And it took me by surprise, and it really, really hurt. And I remember thinking they had told me I didn't need to show up to the next morning's meeting if I needed some time. They wanted me to think about if I still wanted to work for the company. And I have a background in HR, so I know if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And in the recap email, that part was not in writing. And so I knew that if I didn't show up to the next morning meeting, I would be written up for not showing up. And so I showed up, put a smile on my face. I contributed, I continued to do my job, and then I went on my vacation. And when I left for my vacation, I remember thinking I shouldn't be spending the money. I'm pretty sure I'm going to come home to no job. And if I come home to a job, it's going to be a hostile work environment. And I remember being in Italy in tears, thinking, I've given 5 years of my life to this company. I love my clients. I love my coworkers. Is this really where I'm at in my life? And like, I have been turning down, recruiters, and I've been turning down other opportunities and stayed loyal to this company. And it just really, really hurt. But at the same time, the space of the vacation really helped me kind of, I guess, come to terms with what had been already transpiring. I just really didn't want to see it. I really didn't want to give into it. I really wanted things to get better and for it to be a place that I could continue to grow and thrive. And so when I came back from that trip a week later, I did get laid off. Leading up to that week, my leadership team was slow to respond to my emails or didn't ever respond. They have looped me out of conversations with my clients, which was very strange. And when I asked to be looped back in, were slow to respond or didn't respond, which was weird. And so I kind of knew. My gut was like, something weird is going on. And then I got that Teams message, can you join a call in 15 minutes? It was right after morning meeting where my manager at the time had asked me, Ashley, you're getting so many meetings. Can you share with the sales team how you're getting so many meetings? And right after that morning meeting, 15 minutes later, I was in a call with HR and my director being laid off. It was one of the coldest conversations and experiences I've ever had. And my access to everything was shut off in that call. I know so many people listening to this podcast have had similar experiences. And the interesting thing is, in that moment, I felt relief in a way because when you're in a place where ooh, I'm gonna get emotional. When you're in a place where you know that you're no longer wanted, whether you realize it or not, it really starts to eat at your soul and your self-image and just how you feel about yourself. And so there was a moment for me where I felt this relief of like, I wouldn't have made that decision for myself because I wanted it to work and I would have figured it out and I would have done what I needed to do to keep the wheels going forward and to keep trying. And so there was this little part of me that was relieved that it was finally over, that they had made a decision that they meant what they said. They didn't want me there anymore. But obviously it came with a lot of hurt. It came with a lot of, I should have left a year ago when I thought about it because of other leadership things. And so my mind started to play that game and replay every decision and replay, had I left a year ago, where would I be in my career? And obviously the job market has been strange for the last couple of years. And so this was in early 2024. And I remember just feeling overwhelmed with emotions. The first thing I did was go see my friend and her daughter, her little baby. I finally had the time to go spend with, I call her my niece. And it was such a weird feeling to all of a sudden have this free time and go, okay, what do I want to do next? And financially, I was in a different position this time. I had money in the bank. I had a little bit more time to figure out what was next for me. And I didn't really know what I wanted next. I had gotten to the point with leadership teams where I didn't really believe in leadership anymore. I was so concerned that I would get into another team and I would be in another situation where I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to have another great leader again in my career. That was genuinely where I was. And I remember I was laying on my office floor because I had been working from home. And I had the idea for Pink Slip Pavilion. And I remember calling my mom and we were brainstorming ideas of the name. And I told her, I need a positive place. The world needs a positive place to say that a layoff is not a scarlet red letter. It is not a sign that there's something wrong with you. It's a sign that you've been somewhere that you are not meant to be anymore for too long. There's something better for you waiting. And it's just a season, it's a shakeup, it's an uncomfortable transition. But if you choose to grow through it, there are blessings on the other side. And at the time that this idea came to me, I needed this. So it came from a place of, I need this for myself. And so I was on that call with my mom and we came up with Pink Slip Pavilion. And then I said, you know what, Mom? I've got points. Let's go to Hawaii. And we looked to see because I'm from Hawaii originally, for my listeners that don't know. And so I was like, let's go home to Maui. I need to get in the ocean. I need to reconnect with my roots. Like, I need to just like be around the aloha spirit, and the ocean is healing. So I looked at what was available with our points, and we had to fly out 24 hours later. And so I said, can you be here for a flight tomorrow? And my mom lives 4 hours south of me. And she's like, all right, I'm packing and I'm hopping in the car. And 24 hours later, we were home on Maui, and we started working on Pink Slip Pavilion. And the first Pink Slip sticky note went up for Instagram, and we started pretending to do interviews, and I was applying to jobs and I was interviewing for jobs, and I was trying to figure out what was next for me. And later I realized that as I was doing these interviews for jobs, my number one concern was leadership. And I just had this fear that I was going to end up in another job with a leadership team that is not who I want to learn from or grow with. And the pressure of being on a sales team with a six-figure base salary. For those of you who are in sales, the lower your base salary, the lower the pressure to produce right away. The higher the base salary, you need to produce as quickly as possible, because at the end of the day, you have to justify your salary. And the way that the market was, sales takes time, and learning a new sales system takes time, and building new relationships takes time. And so that was another factor. And then I just got to this point where I said, what if I bet on myself this time? What if I chose to give it a shot and do my own thing? If I can make another company $1 million or more, why can't I make myself $100,000? Why can't I make myself $200,000? Why can't I make myself $1 million? And so that's where Ponder This Consulting was born and came from. And I started my entrepreneurship journey and I bootstrapped, and I just said, okay, I'm going to bet on myself. And here we are in 2026. When I'm recording this, I'm about to celebrate 2 years in business for myself. And I can tell you that everything in my life has changed. And it has not been easy. There's been a lot of hurt. There's been a lot of reflection. I think it's a healthy thing when you go through a layoff to look back and go, how can I grow? How can I change? What could I have done better? How could I have shown up better? How can I be a better person in the future? But also, what am I not responsible for? And what hurt can I let go of? And what pain can I let go of? And what relationships do I need to let go of, and accept that they no longer serve the season of life that I'm in? That was one of the most painful things for me. I was really close friends with most of my coworkers, and I started to watch those friendships fall away. And that was really hard. And it wasn't because they weren't lovely people or they didn't love me or anything like that, in my belief. I just think that sometimes you're really close friends because of proximity, and you see each other every day and you talk every day. And so you build these really strong bonds. And then all of a sudden, when you're not in each other's proximity, the dynamic changes because the amount of effort to stay connected changes. And I really saw a lot of that happen. And then there's a divide that happens when you become an entrepreneur. The way that you see the world, the way that you interact with the world shifts. And it changed. It was really, really hard. It has been a really hard season of growing through. And I got hit by a drunk driver in October of 2020. What year? 2024. So a few months after starting my business, I got hit by a drunk driver. And so I was healing from a concussion and a back injury. And I had this baby business that wasn't producing money and couldn't pay my bills. And I was, pulling every dollar I had from everywhere to try to just make ends meet. And I was working through the hurt of just all of it, losing friends. And so if you're walking through a similar season, I want you to know that the struggle does end. And I can genuinely say, like looking at the blessings of my life now, I am the happiest version of myself. Like genuinely. I have never been this happy, and I don't make as much money yet as I made in corporate America. So I really want to correlate that money for me, I've realized, is not a justification for existing in toxic environments or tolerating behavior from people that is unacceptable. That money is not a justification for that. I am worth more than that. I am worth living within my integrity and my morals and my values. And I know that there is a lot of financial abundance in the future because money comes and goes. But I think that one of the biggest blessings that I found through this experience is that what I really value at my core is not money. It's living within my own values and integrity and having a voice and not having my voice be a punishment for or a reason to punish me or a reason to silence me. I have never trusted myself more or felt more comfortable using my voice and having boundaries and asking for what I want. I found my creativity through this experience. If you had asked me 2 years ago, am I creative? I would have said, not really. I would have told you I'm analytical. I literally run a creative business now. There's so much that you can pull out of this season of your life if you're willing to sit in the discomfort and just let it be because it's moving through you. It's not going to drown you. One of my guests talked about not fighting the wave. Don't fight the wave, but also recognize you cannot avoid it. You cannot control it. You cannot avoid it. And if you're willing to just be still and sit with it and let it move through you, I promise you that there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. And I promise you that there is always a new day. There is always new growth. There is always something beautiful down the line for you. I can't promise you it's going to be tomorrow, but I can promise you that if you're willing to grow through this experience, there will be blessings for you. I have no doubt in my mind. I've interviewed people that have said the same thing. I've lived it myself. There are blessings in this for you. So if I were to talk to myself back then, now, I would tell that version of me to let go sooner. And I would also tell her it's going to be okay, which has been a reoccurring theme that you've heard in these episodes. And I would also tell her that it all comes out in the wash. If people are cruel to you, if people are unkind to you, if people try to assassinate your character or speak things that are untrue about you, it always comes out in the wash. So you don't need to worry about it. You need to focus on being the best version of yourself and continuing to live within your own integrity and your own values because you cannot control other people. And people that do those things are dealing with their own things. So I think I would tell her, don't be afraid to, it's okay to be hurt, but don't be afraid to love people even when they don't return the favor. Let's put it that way. Give love, don't feel guilty about it, and do your best to just not let people persuade you out of your own character because they're dealing with their own stuff and that's not your responsibility. And you are worth more than being spoken down to or being hurt repeatedly or being gaslit or any of that. You don't need to be there anymore. Trust your journey, trust your story, trust the process because better is coming. And if you're listening to this right now and you're going through a layoff, you're afraid of a layoff, you've walked through one in the past, and maybe you're still processing that hurt because it is a process. And it's one of the biggest growth processes I think you could have as just a human being. Anytime we go through adversity, it's like this incubator for growth if we're willing to lean into it. But if I were to give you any advice, it would be to trust the process because I'm a person of faith and I personally believe that sometimes we're not willing to remove ourselves from spaces that God no longer wants us to be in. And so he will remove us for our own protection, right? That's where the God's rejection is your protection comes from. If you're not a person of faith, universe, life, whatever it is, trust your journey because I don't believe that anything happens by accident. I really believe that if you're not meant to be somewhere anymore and you won't remove yourself, life will remove you and plant you in a new environment so that you can continue to grow forward and get closer and closer to the best version of yourself. So I would say trust the process. And I would say don't forget to pour into your own cup. If you go through something, especially if you're coming from an environment where you had people speaking down to you or being unkind to you or a toxic work environment, you really need to refill your cup. You really need to take inventory of what parts of me need patching? What parts of me need to let go? What parts of me need a little extra love right now? And how do I get back to myself? Because sometimes we spend so much time in toxic environments, we don't realize that we've started to become toxic ourselves. So my encouragement to you is trust the process, one step at a time, and make sure that you take the time to love yourself and to pour into you because that is the quickest way to get to the next part of your journey. I promise you, the better you feel about yourself, the more you're willing to heal and grow, the better off you're going to be. Well, there you have it, the story that started it all. Without that layoff experience, Ponder This Consulting would not exist, and neither would this podcast, Pink Slip Pavilion, and I would not have connected with so many incredible people that have walked this very journey. I hope that you're leaving this episode feeling inspired that you too can overcome any sort of challenges that are coming with your layoff experience. You can come out the other side better, bigger, badder, whatever you want to be on the other side of this experience. And if you want to connect, all my information will be below in the description of this episode. And we'll be back next Wednesday and every Wednesday. So if you're not subscribed already, make sure you do so you never miss a story. And I'll see you back here next week.
This pink slips the